Hi everyone, welcome to the Docker Part 2 series. In this series, we're gonna install a full functioning WordPress website. So one container is gonna be hosting PHP and Apache, and the other container is gonna be running our database. And for that, we're gonna type in sudo docker ps, and it's gonna tell us if any of the containers are running. In the case you do have some containers running, execute the following command: sudo docker stop, and then container ID. So the container ID will be unique to that container. Now, after we have stopped all the containers, we can issue the following command: sudo docker system prune -a. What it will do, it's gonna remove all stop containers, all networks not used by at least one container, and all images without at least one container associated with them. And so let's press yes. Now in our home directory, let's create a new directory called WordPress. Okay, let's enter the directory. In this directory, we want to create a folder called src. And we also want to, in the same time, create a Docker file. So let's do it. Touch Docker file. Okay. Now let's download WordPress. And let's pick the latest version. Once we've downloaded it, first thing we want to do is extract it. And we want to copy all of these files. And we're going to place them into the src inside our WordPress folder. Now let's edit our Docker file, which is going to help us, which basically gives Docker instructions to build an image. In order to have a fully functioning WordPress website, we need three things. We need PHP, we also need a database, and also it needs to be hosted on a web server. Let's start off by building from pre-existing image file provided by Docker. So we're going to type in from PHP semicolon 8.1.8, which is the latest version of PHP, and let's specify Apache Bullseye web server. So what this is going to do, it's going to download an existing image from Docker Hub that is going to give us foundation we need. So it's going to give us a PHP, and it's going to give us an Apache Bullseye web server. Now we're going to instruct Docker to copy the contents of our src folder into the var/ww/html folder, which is the default folder for Apache web server. So anything placed inside of /var/ww/html is going to give an output, or actually it's gonna allow users to access it. In the next step, we're going to expose port 80 on this new image that we're going to build to incoming traffic. So basically we're telling it to listen on port 80. Now let's save our Docker file. Now let's build this image. So now we're inside the directory. I'm just going to enlarge it so you guys can see it a bit better. And let's give instruction to Docker to build an image. Call it website. And now it's going to download. Now it's finished downloading. You can see it's copied the content of src folder into the default Apache directory, and it's opened up port 80. Now let's run the image we just built, and we can do so by typing in sudo docker run -d to tell Docker to run this container in the background, so we can still use the same terminal. And the next thing we wanted to do, we want to tell this new image to forward all the requests coming to port 80. So, and then what we want to do, we want to mount this volume. So whatever change we're making in src directory, it instantly gets reflected into the Apache default directory. And then name the image. Okay, you can see the image is up and running. We can verify by that they're using sudo docker ps. Now let's check that we can access the local host with the port 80. So we're just going to type in localhost, and you can see it's up and running. So if we press on let's go, you can see next thing it asks us is the database configuration. So let's create a database. To create a database, we're just going to use an already provided line of code on the Docker Hub website that tells us how to install MySQL. And we're slightly going to modify it by typing in sudo docker run, and we'll just call it, instead of some MySQL, we'll just call it MySQL, and we're going to change the password into password. And instead of end part here saying tag, we just want to type in latest. What it does, it's just going to download the latest image of MySQL. Now let's verify that the container running MySQL is up and running. Again, we're going to use a ps command, and you can see it's up and running. Now let's create a database that the Wordpress installer is going to use. And we can simply log into the container, and we do so by typing in sudo docker exec t, and then we type in MySQL, and we're going to use a bash shell to log in. Awesome, we're now logged into the container. Once inside of this container, we can access the MySQL by typing in MySQL user root, and password, we change it into password, and there you go, we're now logged into MySQL. So let's go ahead and create a database that WordPress is going to use. We simply type in create database in capital letters, and finish by typing semicolon. And as you can see, the database has now been created. Now let's exit the MySQL after we created a database, and exit once more to leave the container. Okay guys, now let's try to access our localhost, typing in the database information we previously created. So let's go into database name is WordPress, username is root, we got password. Now it says localhost. Unfortunately, the database is not stored on a localhost, it's stored in its own container. So now let's try to find out the IP address of the container. So let's do this, sudo docker ps. Now we can see the database container ID. Now what I'll do, I'll leave a command that I use to get an IP address of a container in the description file below the video. So let's just do this. Change the container ID to 3A37710F62AB. Now it's telling us that's the IP address. So we're going to use this IP address to try to connect the database. 17.0.3. Now, unfortunately, we get this error message, and it says there's been a critical error on this website. So we can safely presume if we couldn't connect to the database, unfortunately, the problem is not database related. So we'll have to find out what this error is. So I presume it's likely due to the settings on Apache web server and PHP modules. So let's try to fix it. After reading documentation in detail, first thing we need to do is copy some php.ini template files and create .php.ini file. So let's do that. First thing we're going to do is we're going to try to connect into the Apache and PHP web server container. We do so by typing in sudo docker exec IT, and then name of the container, or we can use the container ID. Then typing in bash, because we want to use the bash shell once we log in. So let's visit the following directory. Let's have a look at its content. We can see there's two files here, php.ini-development and the production. So what we need to do, we need to copy the development one into the config.d folder. We can do so by using the copy command and placing it in directory with a new name, php.ini. Now let's install some modules that might be missing on our PHP and Apache image file. We can do that by doing the following: docker-php-ext install MySQL pdo_MySQL. Now that we have done that, let's use the following command: enable, and then let's enable the module MySQL. Okay, it looks like it's already loaded. So now what we're going to do, we're going to restart the Apache server, and we do so by doing the following command: okay, that has now shut down our container, and what we need to do now is re-enable it. So let's do sudo docker start 733 efdb f2366. Awesome. Let's try to see if that made any difference. Let's reload the local host. Let's type in the following. Instead of localhost, we're going to use the IP address. And as you can see, we've made a step forward. So it's unable to create WP config file, but it's giving us what we need to do to create it. So let's go back to our src folder and let's edit the following file. Let's change from the sample to the wp.config, copy it all, paste the new one, press save, and let's see if we've made progress. Let's use the local host, and now we can create the WordPress site. WordPress in Docker. Username is going to be Marco, password is just going to be default password. Let's type in password, weak password, journey@gmail.com. Got a search engines, but it's local anyway. Save. Let's log in. As you can see, now it's installed. If we visit it, we can see the website is up and running. Congratulations, guys. In the next tutorial, we're going to use about Docker Compose. Compose is just a tool that allows us to define and run multi-container Docker applications.